talk about SEO, and we're here at Hackfort, which is super exciting. We're here to talk about expertise, authority, and trust. EAT, if you will. It has lots to do with content and making your website something that will show up in Google, which is exactly what you want. You want people to be able to find you when they Google you.
So before we launch into our portion, which is mostly us talking, we wanted some audience participation. So just by a quick vote of hands, who all's here just because they have a general interest in SEO? So that's what. All right. Who's here? Maybe not because they know anything about SEO, but just because they're interested in Google and search engines. A little bit. Is there anybody here just because they have some affiliation with Page One Power, or they recognize that brand name from business, personal? A few. All right. We're going to do what we can to tailor this to all the different interests that brought you here, but ultimately we're going to just try to break down some facts which are true no matter what you're here for. So, a little bit about us.
No, he works at Page One Power. It is a place in which he works. He's our head of on-site content, so he does a lot of the soft skills of, is this an article that someone actually wants to read? Does it fit the audience?
And Mary is our technical specialist. She does a lot of the behind-the-scenes HTML wrangling, auditing of websites to figure out what less than obvious things that the average user may not recognize are going wrong, are holding back a website or keeping it from being visible the way that it should be or functioning the way that it should be. So between the two of us, we kind of have a nice, I don't know, fire and water, oil and water maybe.
I think we can blame it on nerd and hippie.
Nerd and hippie, yeah. I'm the hippie, she's the nerd.
Mary, can you try to speak up a little bit?
Yes, I can. So, just a real quick rundown, in case you don't know what SEO is, because we're going to be talking about it the whole time. It's search engine optimization. Search engine optimization, you sell good shoes, when someone types good shoes into Google, you want to show up. Well, we can help you do that, and that is what search engine optimizing is.
We call it SEO, but here in the United States, I think just upwards of 90% of all searches are done through Google. So if you talk about search engines, it's usually a euphemism for Google, although things like Bing, Yahoo, Alta Vista, that stuff exists, but overwhelmingly people are using Google. In fact, even if they're actually trying to search for something on YouTube, you'll find people Googling that funny viral video YouTube in a Google search. So it's almost interchangeable, but not quite.
So what is good SEO? You want the content on your site to show that you're an expert, that you have authority in what you're saying, and to be trustworthy. EAT is good SEO, and here's the T on it.
So the fun thing about EAT, this is an acronym that I think actually originated from Google. Google can be really opaque because if there's one thing you take away from this, I hope it will be this. Google is not actually a search engine. Google is an advertising platform. Google is really not all that different from radio or newsprint or television. They're trying to capture your attention with something that you actually want, something that's useful or amusing. And in using your attention, capturing your attention, they want to monetize that by selling advertisements. So Google's interest isn't really in helping your business show up in a search result or getting you more traffic to your website. Google is interested in answering people's questions as effectively as possible so that they come back and keep using Google and see the ads that generally appear at the top of the search results. So if you actually want to be visible in Google without paying them and paying for the advertising, that's kind of what we're going to try to break down. That's what we call organic traffic. People finding you because you answered a question or gave them information they were actually looking for.
Alright, so at a bare minimum, you have to be trustworthy. This can mean a variety of things. It means that your site must be technically sound. You can't run a sketchy website that's going to steal credit card numbers, It has to be secure, so that means someone else can't use your website to steal credit card numbers. Your information has to be valid at just a bare minimum. Please put correct information on the web. And are your cited sources quality? Are you backing yourself up to show that your information is valid? The TLDR on it is that the information and data on your website must be trusted information.
So when we say trust, or when Google says or suggests trust, there's two sides to that, right? There's being trustworthy, having your site not be spammy, having the page actually load when someone clicks on it, not redirecting so that they think they're going to go to one page and going to another. There's lots of technical aspects to it. Being trustworthy as far as the information being accurate. Conspiracy theories are, kind of a gray area in Google. But the other side is not just being trustworthy, but having actual evidence of trust. It's fine for me to get up here and say, hey, trust me, I'm a nice guy. But it would count for a lot more if someone would actually vouch for me. Page One Power, where we're from, started out as a link building company. Links are one of the primary demonstrations of trust that your site can have online. The more people who cite your website, cite, C-I-T-E, your website, those are kind of votes of trust. Google does its best to approximate how humans read and interact with content, but ultimately it's machine, right? It's a series of algorithms. So when we say trust or trustworthiness, Google can't measure that discretely. It's an abstract concept. So for all of the things, the E and the A and the T, Google uses proxies to try to get its best approximation of trust and expertise and authority. There's lots of ways to measure trust, but probably the number one is actually having people linked to your site, on top of all the demonstrations of trustworthiness that you need on the back end.
You have to be a real expert in what you're talking about. Some examples of this is if you are a tax site, maybe have a tax expert talk about taxes, don't have your woodworker talk about it. And there's a lot of ways that you can show that you're an expert. So from a technical aspect, I look for markup around the authors to make sure that the authors are being given all their quantifiers of authority. There's a lot that you can show through quality though. So if you're a gardening website, obviously you don't need a gardening expert. That's not as important as taxes. But if you have a very comprehensive list about how to go from a seedling all the way to a full plant and you're very informative, that's another way that your quality, that your content can show quality and that you can show that you're a real expert.
So I like to use a lot of analogies. So I hope that makes things more intelligible to you and not more confusing. But the analogy I would use for expertise, it's sort of like if you were putting together a resume to apply for a job, you can put basically anything that you want, right? You can claim to be an expert. I'm a judo level master of Microsoft Office, whatever you want. But there's an adage, especially in fiction, movies, show, don't tell. And that applies extremely on SEO matters. You can say that you're an expert, you can say, I know all about whatever my topic is, therefore you should trust me, therefore you should link to me, all that. But the more comprehensive your content is, the more different ways you find to make concepts simple, to talk about whatever your subject is, whatever your topic of expertise is, the more you show that you are in fact an expert. You can't just read one book on a thing and say, I'm an expert. You can't become a college professor by going, well, I took the 101 level class. I'm pretty sure I'm ready to teach master's students. It's the same thing online. You can put information in your bio, in your author byline saying, yeah, I'm an expert in this. But the more you write and the more comprehensively you treat your topic and you exhaust all the topics related to it, the more Google can recognize, yeah, this website and the people contributing to this website, they are experts. Clearly, they have literally written a book, as it were, on whatever your topic is.
And as much as we talk about these, it's not as important that you keep those in mind as trust is this, expertise is this, and authority is this. They work like a tricycle. If you keep in mind the general idea of what we're talking about, it'll do you a lot better. So here we're talking about expertise, But you could also say that an extensively researched quality piece of content also has those links as well that we talked about with trust.
Yeah, it's a three-way Venn diagram, or tricycles, a better analogy. You can't have any one of these and coast entirely on that.
All right, so you have to be authoritative. If you are, even if you write a very comprehensive article and you are the authority, if the other people on the web are saying that you're a liar, Google might believe them. One specific example that they've called out in the quality guidelines that outline this is the conspiracy theory about Nibiru. The people who write Nibiru conspiracy theories write very extensive, huge articles, but everywhere else on the web says there's not another planet coming to get us. And so they have very extensive quality content, but what they do not have is they do not have that authority. So make sure that you have authority in your fields. That says good things about you. What do your neighbors on the internet say?
I love that example because the web, by definition, is a community. Content doesn't exist in isolation. So just like with expertise, you can show up and say, I'm an expert. I've written 1,000 articles on, whatever your thing is, magic crystals curing cancer. But if other recognized authorities who have been around longer, who have the citations, who have the portfolio, if you don't match what they're saying, or you're contradicting a more trusted, better recognized authority, that doesn't do great things for your apparent authority. Conversely, we all stand on the shoulders of giants, right? We know what we know because someone else taught us. There's a lot of reluctance in our experience dealing with actual websites and clients to link externally to other websites as though that's bad. It's going to lead people away from your website or make you look like you don't know what you're talking about. In fact, the opposite of true. You're never going to read any research that doesn't have a bibliography, right? You're never going to read a study that doesn't explain the methodology. So if you're going to try to write expert content on any topic, you better believe someone else has something relevant that you can cite. A quote, a statistic, original research, expert commentary. That's a good thing. The web is a community, and the more you look like an expert and trustworthy member of that community, the more Google can say, this is an authority worthy of presenting as an answer to people's queries. And so putting all three of those together and just being transparent about where you're coming from, what qualifies you, why you're trustworthy, that's effectively what's going to get your content to actually show up in a search result. Yes?
Assuming your call to action is on the top half of the screen, would you put those links that would kick people out to other websites below your call to action then? Would that be a useful strategy?
So when we talk about we talk a lot about upper level content and also very informational level content. On your informational pages that are bringing people in and answering your queries, I would put your call to action somewhere in the middle because this is an informational piece. Of course, it really depends on how they interact with the page. So if your call to action is the reason that they're on that page, keep the call to action up there.
Thank you.
Yeah, my general feeling to add on to that is when people are looking for an answer to the question, they're not looking to be told to do something. They're looking for answers. So I would suppress the urge to build content around calls to action and instead try to elevate what is the intent that's driving a query. If someone searches, who is the President of the United States? They just need a name. That's the answer to their question. So building a call to action around an informative query, it's not going to make you the best answer. And as far as where the citation should go, wherever the information you're citing is. The great thing about the internet is you can put the link right where the information is. You don't have to drop it into a bibliography for people to try to figure out using footnotes or anything. So.
Just a last add-on, please look back up with us later. We have webinars available online about linking user intent to the content that you build.
Yeah.
So like question, you mentioned earlier that how do you measure trust? So I guess how do you measure trust? Are there any KPIs that you can use to do that?
number one KPI is going to be backlinks. The number of other websites and other pages linking to your domain cumulatively and the individual pages on your domain. And this is also great news if you're selling something and you have a lot of content that is CTA driven. If you balance that, those product pages, those checkout pages, those email sign up pages, whatever the action would be that you're calling people to, if you balance that with just free useful information that people are searching for, you can reach a balance where you're elevating your actual product pages by association with the informational pages.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
If you strike a balance like that, that makes you look like a result worth sharing with people,
Okay.
as opposed to just someone who's out to sell something, and Google would really rather you just bot traffic with ads. That just
Thank
got us logged out here.
That's a 404, huh?
It's a software report, it looks okay.
All right.
So yeah, it takes some time. It takes some time to build up that you have authority, that you're trustworthy. It does take a lot to be an expert in the field. You don't come out writing tax articles that are super comprehensive and match user intent and providing quality information to the internet. It takes time and knowledge to build that sort of content.
Looping back to the beginning, Google isn't really interested in making you visible unless you give people the answers that they're looking for. If you give them an incentive to come back to Google, to use it again to search for other things, you can't show up in Google just by existing. Other than owning your brand name, if people have a reason to even search for you by name, you have to provide compelling information that's useful, actionable, unique especially, that answers the questions that people actually have. You don't get to show up in Google just because you showed up to the web.
So what's bad? We talked a lot about good content. You want to be an expert, you want to have authority, you want to be trustworthy. Being bad does vary by what niche you're building in. So just like I talked about, you don't need to be a gardening expert to write about gardening. You just have to write good content about gardening versus tax and health articles. You probably should have an expert write those sort of things. There are varying things on what's bad. So if you are an e-commerce site, if you're dealing with any sort of credit cards, any sort of financials, it is more important for you to be a secure website, be a safe website. So other than the quick, obvious, it's good, pretty easy to see what's bad, being crystals will cure cancer, Nibiru is a planet. There are quite a bit of other things that can be bad.
It seems simple, but probably the biggest bad thing that people do and don't really think about is failing to answer the question that you propose to answer. So if someone searches for who is the president, and instead of providing a name, you say, sworn in on these versions of the Bible on such and such a date, this was the weather, and you bury the actual information that people are searching for, not a good answer. Might be good content, might be extremely well written, might be a movie about it coming out soon, doesn't answer the question. Google is just trying to get people the information that they're looking for to keep them coming back to Google. If you can't answer the question, it doesn't really matter what other qualities you have. That's what Google's for, is just connecting people with information. It's one of the challenges that we have is, you're taught in high school and grade school and college how to write a good essay and how to hook people's attention. The same thing applies for journalism a lot of the time. All these things that make for engaging, interesting, viral-ready content doesn't really make for good search content if you don't put the answers to the questions at the top of your content.
I love this comment.
Yeah. So this is kind of like a day in the life at P1P. This is a very common attitude that exemplifies what I just described. Maybe you have an e-commerce website. You want to rank #1 in the Treasure Valley for shoes. So you put up all your different shoes product pages, and then you go, I'm not ranking, what should I do? I'll write a blog about shoes. And what's your blog about? Your product pages. Well, that kind of circular life doesn't really help people find what they're looking for. It doesn't answer questions. So, like I said before, if you can strike a balance between real content that answers questions, provides helpful information, isn't commercially motivated or transactionally motivated, that's the kind of thing that will help elevate your whole site, including those product pages that maybe initially weren't the best answer to a specific question.
So this whole talk, a lot of it was focused on content. There's just one thing to keep in mind. EAT is very content focused. It is about providing quality content that has the ability to rank. But when we look at rankings, we look at a lot more than quality content. So this little list here is stolen from the Webmaster Guidelines. From top to bottom, the top is the most important, or the most terrible, I guess, for your website. And the bottom is the least important. What we've been talking about today is how to make content good. But if anything above content exists on your site, you will be stopping your content from ranking, yes?
Can you explain the context of this a little bit? It says on there that low value add URLs.
Yes. So a low value, Google's nice, they don't say trash URLs. But it's in order of significance. So faceted navigation is worse for your site than duplicate content. Of course, faceted navigation is just duplicate content on steroids.
Is worse for your site.
Yes.
So like a dynamically built query string with different parameters based on some sort of navigation system is worse for your site than duplicate content?
I'm going to have to follow back up with you. It depends on how it's set
I'm
up.
not challenging you, I'm just trying to
Yeah.
make sure.
No,
I
it depends
understand.
on how it's set up. So there's a tagging system that you use to manage it. There's a lot that goes into how you present things. But yes, according to the Webmaster Guidelines, if that what you are describing is faceted navigation, and it is indexable faceted navigation, it is worse than like hack pages and duplicate content. If you're describing faceted navigation,
Yeah.
indexable faceted navigation.
What do you mean by faceted navigation?
Faceted navigation is available on a lot of e-commerce sites. So perhaps the same Swedish fish product is available on a million different URLs. I can send you copies of our slideshow. These are live links. You can go to Webmaster Tools. And you'll know if you have it if you go into your search console. There's a million excluded pages and like 500 real ones. It's a lot easier to recognize on site. Means if you want to show up in search, you do need a comprehensive campaign strategy. So content is important. Informational content is important. Link building is important to build that community around the web. Technical, very important.
So I hope that one of the lessons you take away from this is it's very integrative. All of these different things fit together. The expertise, the authority, the trustworthiness, they all fit together. Optimizing for humans first, because they're the ones who are actually going to interact with your site. They're the ones using Google to search for information. They're the ones deciding which results most satisfy their queries. But also, we call it SEO for a reason. You're optimizing for the search engines, yes, that people use, but which are ultimately machines. So when you write good quality content and you optimize all the things that are obvious and visible and make them look nice, remembering that all the technical stuff on the back end, clean HTML, not having all the errors that we just talked about, which there's a whole universe of technical errors that you can have depending on what your site is and everything. But SEO is really about the interplay and the harmony between optimizing for Google and its, all things considered, rather simple algorithm, as well as optimizing for the ever-changing needs and expectations and questions that actual human users have.
So if you want to learn more about EAT, the nice thing about Google is that they give us a lot of information. That list before that we looked at was directly stolen from the Webmaster Guidelines. And this URL is the 164-page PDF in which they outline exactly what he is and give a ton of examples if you want to read more about why Nibiru is terrible.
For those of you who aren't familiar, it's a little bit of a mouthful, but the search engine evaluators, these are actual humans that Google employs to manually do Google searches, look at the results that they get for these different searches, and then have feelings about whether these are good results. It doesn't actually directly affect the specific results page or how the algorithm is working, but it's the kind of feedback that Google tries to integrate into future algorithm updates. So if it gets a lot of feedback from people going, I don't like this feature of the SERP, the search engine results page, or you're not answering this question very well, Google can rewrite some amount of code into the algorithm to try to just make itself more intelligent. So the algorithm is always changing. How Google does what it does is always usually incrementally changing. Even this very moment, perhaps, there are algorithmic updates rolling out.
Oh my gosh, this morning they cut out pagination. Did everyone see that? The way you, the reference, the markup for marking, like, oh, this is page 2 of the article. They're like, we're not recognizing that anymore, or so they said via Twitter.
It ebbs and flows. Bottom line is, Google is like Pinocchio. Is the last analogy I'm going to use. Google is like Pinocchio. It desperately wants to be a real boy, but it's not. Rather than a puppet, it's an algorithm and a series of servers and a giant brain, the likes of which humanity has never seen. The point is, the deepest and existential aspiration of Google is to replicate the human brain and how it reads and understands and appreciates information. So if you optimize for people first, you're not going to be algorithm proof, but you're going to be pretty close.
Yes.
I have a couple technical questions.
Is
So, what kind of an impact does page speed really have? And 2, how safe is it to use client-side rendered content? And if it's not safe now, when will it ever be safe?
Okay, we'll talk about page speed. Sorry, I'm gonna have to give me a second for client-side review. So page speed is semi-dependent on your client engage. I like page speed a whole bunch, and the importance of page speed is picking up. So if you address it early, you'll get more benefits, kind of similar to the way they told everyone they said go secure, go HTTPS. You get a little benefit at first, but over time that's become more and more important. I think it also has to do with your niche. We do talk about users quite a bit in technical, and part of that is Google does kind of track users and it cares about what they like on page. If your users like your image heavy, super slow page more than they like your super fast but bare page, go with what your users want. Getting that higher interaction rating will be better than stripping your page just for speed. I'll have to come back to you and ask a couple more questions about what you mean with client-side rendering. Do you use pre-rendered websites?
Yeah, but
Okay.
what we want to be able to build is applications that render content in the client side, so they're not having to be server-side rendered. And the conventional wisdom is that Google can't parse client-side content, and I want to do that.
I will come back to you because I have many opinions on this. So many. JavaScript is the thing that they're like, every day better and better. We find out they can redo stuff.
Okay.
Yeah?
Is it better to post video on your own server, or is it better to embed video hosted on like a Vimeo or YouTube?
Google has just a dickens of a time for your video. I don't know if you've ever done a fetch and render in your search console, but most of the time the video won't show up when you render the page, which is in the new search console. You have to live test the URL and then look at a screenshot. It's weird. I know they change all the time. You can still use the old fetch and render until it's 20 weeks. So I guess the long and short of it is, it doesn't matter that much as long as you put a lot of descriptions around the video that you have embedded on your site. Yes.
So it sounded like to keep your website up front and fresh, you have to hire a full-time content generator, someone to make up all sorts of authoritative stuff.
Well, are you an authority in your field?
Well, of course, but
How if you're an authority and you can put time
I'm not a
in?
writer though. I'm an expert in something else, but I'm not a writer. Writing takes too long.
Well, you might need a writer, but if you can provide expert, you can have something to say that provides expertise, and you can show who you're citing your sources and making it
If I
very
write two
authoritative.
articles and I'm done, we'd have to keep writing stuff ad nauseum.
And not ad nauseum, I wouldn't say.
Not ad nauseum. The internet moves pretty fast. So this is kind of also my hippie answer to supplement all of the nerd answers that we've been getting for these technical questions. It's all relative. The best answer to any given question, it's not absolutely the best answer. It's the best answer relative to everyone else who's trying to answer the question. So if you happen to be in an industry or a niche that there's not as much content and most of the people aren't self-described writers, you can get away with less frequent publication. If you're in a really busy industry where there's a lot of news about it and there's constant change and the types of questions that people have are recurring or increasing or changing, you're probably going to want to have a content schedule and probably a content specialist to keep up with that. But the general rule of thumb is the more regularly you update your website, which can be as simple as just putting a post on your blog every month, the more regularly you do that, the more reason you give search engines like Google to come back and look at what's going on at your site and go, someone's maintaining this, someone cares, it's trustworthy, so it's worth continuing to list in the results. Beyond that really basic, at least try to have a regular schedule, if not, an incredibly busy, consistent, daily, multiple times a day kind of publication schedule is very relative. You got to look at what the competitors are doing in your industry. I guess that means the answer to your question is probably behooves you to get someone who's willing to write regularly.
Yeah?
I'm curious about Google's actual capabilities. I don't know much about it. When you guys talk about building quality content, is it that the content produces the interest that leads to all these links, or is it that Google can actually look to where your site is externally linked to and read and absorb the content around that with some AI mechanism and then decide if it's valuable?
Let's talk about Panda. Sorry. So Google travels through links. They started the Library of Congress, they go all the way down, and they travel through links, and they do read anchor text. And quite some time ago, they had a big update. People used to be able to put whatever around their content. So you would see a lot of the exact match keywords where someone would go, oh, I want to write for credit card. I'm going to have 1 million people link to me with the anchor text credit card. Then I'm also going to embed the word credit card just throughout randomly. I forget how many years ago it was,
7.
But 7 years ago, they rolled out a big update, and they said, no more spam content. Please stop embedding words and trying to trick us with these random words. So it does a pretty good job of following through the links and understanding what's around it.
There's also something that we call a link neighborhood, and that's sort of, if you're on a page that's a list of links, and let's say you run, a homeless shelter. If you're on a page with links to a bunch of other resources that are complementary to a homeless shelter or other nonprofits or something like that, most of those links aren't pointing to your site, right? Just the one is. But you're in a link neighborhood that allows Google to sort of get a larger semantic understanding of what you're about, who you're relevant to, what your relative authority is, that kind of thing. We anthropomorphize Google a lot, but the fact is, there's one more analogy. I said I wasn't going to. So, you know the old saying that when you look at stars, you're just seeing old light? It takes billions of years or however long for the actual light to reach us, so we're looking backwards in time. Google works the same way. When you search for something and you get those 10 blue links that are maybe the answers to your question, those may or may not be live pages. That information may or may not actually exist out there on the web anymore. What you're looking into is Google's memory of the web. So that's how Google's able to give you such quick search results. It goes out, it's constantly crawling and indexing and saving what it finds on the web on its servers, so that when a query comes in, it can go, I remember some of these words. I remember a page that seemed to be relevant to this. It's easier the more people search for something, but you're looking backwards in time at what Google remembers. So Google is reading the web constantly, and it's mostly the text of the web, which includes the links, the anchor text, the context surrounding your links. Google is at a point where it's definitely not on a human level, but it's at a level of fairly impressive and sophisticated contextual understanding of words. Classic example, if you Google apple right now, you're probably not going to get a picture of a red fruit, right? You're probably going to get a corporate website. Google has figured out that most people, when they search apple, mean the company, not something botanical, right? That's one big example, but a common one.
And then one follow-up is like, how can I, being a pretty unsophisticated person, like see where I'm being linked to on the web? Is there any way to see where you're externally being linked to, like Google can see?
Yeah. There's a lot. Well, we love Majestic, although Majestic is, money. Versus, you can see an approximation. By approximation, I mean it's not perfect. It won't pull every place that's linking to you, and every place that you're linking out in your Search Console. And that's in the Performance tab. Search Console is a free tool. You can put it on your website. Everyone put Search Console and Analytics on your website, please.
There's a lot of paid and free tools that you can use too. I mean, literally, if you Google backlink check or anything along those lines, you'll find things, but I would start with Search Console. Yeah?
At a high level, does authority carry over? So if most people find our site by looking up our brand name, right? And then we start creating content. Will we be able to leverage the fact that people look up our brand name to create content and rank higher?
Yes. Your reputation online matters. It's a hard thing for Google to measure discreetly. Yelp reviews, mentions on social media, those factor in the search quality evaluator guidelines, the 164-page document that everyone should go out and read.
It's so skimmable.
But yeah, if you have brand equity, that does create some limited but meaningful authority for your site.
Did you have your hand up first? I'm sorry.
You mentioned the author bio information. Can you talk briefly about the schema that would go with that and how important that is?
Yeah. So schema.org is where I go to look up all my schema markup. Noting people, especially people of interest, can be a good way to point out, like, hey, this person is an authority. As you can see, this is Dr. Tim, and everywhere else on the web has also been marked up as Dr. Tim. I like to refer to schema as labeling the proper nouns on your website. So people, places, things, anything, proper noun of importance. Schema.org is definitely where I get that information. Yes.
How do you recommend a restructure in your website URL? So you might have a page ranking for mywebsite.com, product, and and it's got a good page ranking. But then you come in and you say, no, it's not product. It's subsection product. So you got to take that URL ranking forward. How do you handle that kind of forwarding of the?
I prefer, if you are doing any sort of migration, I would prefer server-side migration in order to keep some of that authority. I think you're asking about changing one URL to another one. Doing a server-side migration is what I would recommend.
What do you mean by that?
So you can 301 this URL to that URL, and a lot of your authority SEO juice will follow over as long as the new URL is very similar or it offers the same answers. It has the same authority as the old page. I prefer, if you are going to do a change up like that, there's a lot of things that go into migration, but you can also do it in your backend to make it a little bit more seamless. And then you can also, make sure you tell Google, put it in your sitemap, put it in, let them know. And before, when I was talking about getting Search Console, you can also immediately request indexing in Search Console of your new page.
So I just kind of want to be careful with how I ask this question, but
Okay.
you talked earlier about competition. A lot of your competitors have already done a lot of the work. Is there a way to kind of leverage or copy what they've done?
And do it better.
Yeah. Whoever's out there, there's a lot of inertia in the SERPs. If people seem to generally be happy with the answers that they're getting to their question, it's not a lot of incentive for Google to change who's ranking for what. But there's almost always room for you, with your human brain, to look at who's answering the question that you want to be the answer to, and answer it better. That can mean better matching the language that people are actually using to ask the question. That could mean anticipating obvious follow-up questions that they might have. Who is the president since when? First term or second? So that you can take what seems to be a simple query and add more information that's better for those users. But ultimately, yeah, it's what can you do better? Or at least be as good as current ranking competitors.
And so we go back into link building. If you have a better piece of content that you feel like should be outranking it, you can try to link where they're linking and include even more links to give your article a little bit more web authority than theirs.
I'm just wondering what the best practice is for a situation where you have content page, landing page, promo page, whatever, that's backlinked, and then that page comes down. Is it better to just kind of eat 404, or do you want to kind of eat the misleading content and like redirect it to a home page or a related page or something like that?
So you have a page that's been linked to a lot and it's gone?
So yeah, example.com/promo, like an e-commerce site using promo.
Does promo page get a lot of organic traffic?
Decent amount, probably. Obviously, there's media pushing to it and stuff like that, which helps kind of build the organic. And then pulling that down, will that 404 kind of hurt the root domain, or is that something that?
The 404 once again, super depends. If it was getting a lot of traffic and it's important, why not rebuild the page? And also if it was important and you don't want to rebuild the page, you have something called link reclamation, where you go back and you say, hey, that page is now down, please point to a functional page on our website again. Of course, if it makes sense for it to go to the homepage, like if you took down a very promotional page, that would be one that I would say, yeah, redirect it to the homepage if it's not specifically misleading.
If possible, I would try to plan ahead to see if you can repurpose a page. Like, if it's a spring break page, that's a promotion, right? But it's going to be a seasonal thing. If there's a way that you can bring it back or update it so that it's current for the latest promotion, that would be preferable to 404 or getting rid of it entirely. When that's ever an option, I would do that. If you have content that actually gets traffic, is answering people's questions, and has gotten links, across the web, I would generally want to err on the side of repurposing it, not so that it's misleading and that the links don't make sense, but Google loves refreshed and updated content. There's a lot of queries that end in 2019 and things like that. Black Friday deals 2019. So, to whatever extent possible, I would try to refresh and update before I 404.
Yes.
I'm kind of curious, it's kind of a two-pronged question about creating content. So one, do you recommend any specific tools, like say for you're writing a blog, besides Yoast, because that's the only one I know of. And when you are creating content, I'm sure most people who have a business are kind of in a niche, and you have, maybe 4 or 5 things that you talk about all the time. And it's my understanding that Google doesn't really like you to use the same keywords over and over and over. So how do you get around that and make it creative content?
I'm gonna say one thing. I have a few bits. One of them isn't gonna be the greatest, but there is a course at Fuller talking about how to learn creativity or how to teach creativity. We love keyword research at Page One Power. So looking at the different keywords that we can use and gets us out of that 4 or 5 mindset. And sometimes it's just about, linking synonyms. So you might say cars, because you had in one article, but throw in automobile. The 4 wheels get around. I'm sorry, I'm bad at thinking of synonyms, even though I just recommended it.
Yeah, keyword research, I think a lot of people think about it like, I sell shoes, so I need shoes to recur on my website as much as possible. But there's a lot of different ways that you can package the word shoe. It's not about targeting the same keyword over and over that Google doesn't care for. It's about keyword stuffing in a way that doesn't create diverse content. It doesn't answer more than one question. There's a lot of questions that you can ask about shoes, or any other topic for that matter. So using a keyword research tool is where I normally start to try to come up with diverse content, because there's a lot of different ways that people even ask the same question. You can answer the same question in a lot of different ways, and it's not duplicate content. It's not bad for users. It's actually quite good because you meet them exactly where they live and how they search. So I would recommend keyword research tools. There are many. My favorite is SEMrush. That usually requires a paid subscription. I'm trying to think. There's a few free tools out there. Ahrefs is, between them and SEMrush, those are kind of the industry leaders. There's also free extensions that you can get that give you similar information. It's not quite as customizable.
If you're going for a baseline, once again, I cannot put Search Console available on your website because queries are available in your Search Console. It is not 100%, but it can give you a good starting place.
Yeah, I already have that, but it's still, most of the words I'm already using, and then Yoast says, you use this word a lot.
I have a lovely relationship with Yoast. Sometimes I'm like, yes, title tag links, and other times I'm like, oh man, it's created a million duplications because they changed their formatting for images in the fall.
To your question about using tools for the writing side, not necessarily for the keyword research side, I frankly discourage using any tools for writing. Writing is a human enterprise, and any tool that's doing a word count check or a keyword density analysis or the Fleisch-Kincaid readability index, I think those are all mostly pretty noisy. You know a good answer when you read it. You should be able to know a bad answer when you read it. There's no tool that you're going to use that is going to be more effective at indexing and comprehending your content than Google. So I think they're all half measures at best. Yoast is okay, but it's also kind of a blunt instrument. So you can beta test your content just with people. Google Search Console is another great way to look at it, but ultimately I would look at keywords and focus on the human experience before I rely too heavily on the tools.
So does that stuff about when you have those WordPress SEO plugins and they tell you to use the keyword like with a certain level of heading and all that stuff, is that looks you have a bad taste?
Use your people eyes. It sounds crazy, but you may not have said the word shoes in your article 5 times because shoes was the keyword you were trying to rank for, but maybe you said heel, or maybe you used a lot of other words related to shoes like walking and running optimization or whatever. Most of the time, it's very, very rare that Google doesn't connect the two. By very, very rare, I mean the only exception is we've seen it have some trouble with rare acronyms, and so we've had to be like, instead of the acronym, let's use the whole thing next to it as well, and world of difference.
Yeah, acronyms can be fussy, but keyword density is a brick through a window. It is not a useful tool by and large. Keyword density will tell you how many times you said shoes on your shoe page, but a human will want to read and see shoes, boots, sandals, footwear, kicks, heels. There's a lot of ways to say it. Keyword density isn't going to get you there. the way that just reading your content going, this reads really well, this is a good answer, this is descriptive.
Because keyword density does force kind of an unnatural looking article.
Keyword stuffing.
Yeah.
Yeah, bad juju.
Thank you. Okay.
I think we're just about out of time, so we might have one more question that we can take.
I hope
Or
everyone
not.
has a wonderful day.
Thank you very much for coming.
Every year you sponsor Hackfort, which is, for those of you who are not aware, Hackfort. This is a tech festival that brings the community together to share knowledge and new skills with one another. Hackfort.